Ontario is expected to soon lift all remaining COVID restrictions. Right now, 81.7% of eligible residents have one dose, 72.7% have two doses. The province wants to see that number hit 75% before moving out of phase 3 and back to normal. But cases of COVID-19 are again climbing. The province reported 324 new infections in the last 24 hours, more than double what it was a week ago. Most are among the unvaccinated or partially vaccinated. There are 108 people in hospital. Just 6 of those are fully vaccinated. Dr. Peter Juni is the head of Ontario's Science Advisory Table. He is in Toronto. Thank you very much for joining us today. I want to ask, you are making some pretty grim predictions about what is going to happen specifically to the unvaccinated portion of the population if the current reopening path continues. What's your concern?
Yeah, look, we're still in a difficult situation there. We need to be aware of that those people above the age of 45 or 50 contribute most of the ICU admissions and most of the hospital admissions in this province and will contribute in the future. And that's the problem now. If we still have on average 20% of those people not fully vaccinated, this means that they can end up with a lot of ICU admissions. And when you look at the numbers, the potential is there for the unvaccinated to experience roughly 20,000 ICU admissions. Therefore, we need to just go a little bit careful and make sure that we just make it without major burden to the healthcare system.
Kids under the age of 12 can't be vaccinated, and we are expecting schools to open in September. Do you have concerns there?
Well, we don't know yet what's coming exactly. We see now with Delta in the US that we have a signal with hospital admissions going up in kids. And we need to be aware of that. We don't have a possibility to protect them through vaccines yet, so we need to gain a little bit time. This means, again, if we just would let go of control, our case numbers would get too high. And even though we have good measures in place, I would hope, for schools when they reopen, if the community transmission is too high, we will have a lot of cases introduced into classes, and that's a problem then. So we need to gain a little bit more time there too.
Dr. Kieran Moore said earlier this week that the province could be about a week away from hitting its target to lift more restrictions. Do you think that plan should continue as is?
To be honest with you, I don't see a scenario where it can continue unless there's a miracle. Let's face that. We're in exponential growth now. We have roughly a doubling time of 10 days, meaning the daily case counts will double every 10 days. If we are at 370 now, it could be in 10 days that we're above 700 already. And we just need to be aware of that we can't lose control. If you want to see how this looks, if you lose control, you go to the Netherlands, for example. We don't want to be there. So to put anything on top of step 3 resulted in the exponential growth we're in now, would just not be a good idea now.
So your best advice to the Ontario government would right now be to keep the measures as is, or do we need to reimpose some measures, some of those, whatever mitigation measures that you think are, do we need to reimpose things? And if so, what would you reimpose?
I think it's important now just not to panic, to breathe, and to be aware of that we're in a much better position than before. Why? Because of everybody who is vaccinated fully. And then continue the good work that we're doing with vaccination and just stay put in step 3. Observe what happens with ICU occupancy, with hospital occupancy, and then really make it safely into the next step. The next step could then be school reopening. And the point then is, we then need to find just a good balance there. And the longer this pandemic now takes, the more we will leave probably case numbers as the parameter and go into ICU and hospital occupancy as the parameter to consider. But we first need to make it to the point where kids younger than 12 can get vaccinated. So we as a society have fulfilled our obligation to protect them too.
A federal election campaign could be called really within a matter of days now. With cases where they are in Ontario, are you comfortable with election campaign events taking place?
Oh, I never thought about that part. It depends on where they took place or take place then, etc. We just need to be aware of that. You know, the old sermon that I repeated for months now, that outside is much safer than inside, this continues to be the case. And we just need to be aware of that if we have large gatherings inside, this could generate super spreader events, which would absolutely not be a good idea now.
Canada's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Canada's top doctor, has said from her perspective that, yes, it is okay to be safe to hold an election in terms of the voting process. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, you know, everything which is not just some sort of big convoluted mess or so will be okay. We're much more, you know, in trouble if we have large sports events, etc. Probably everything which is just outside will be fine. Everything where good ventilation is in place and physical distancing can happen and masking, that should be okay.
The one last thing I want to ask you about, we've got about a minute left here. What we've seen happen in the United States, I know that the vaccination situation south of the border is completely different than what we're seeing up here. The uptake here is much stronger. But if we get to a situation where the fourth wave does get out of control, do you think the public will is still there to reimpose certain measures, whatever they may need to be? Is there still public will to try and get these things under control right now, or is everyone just so fatigued by the pandemic?
Oh, I think we're all fatigued, but I believe in us, to be honest with you. The point is then how we reimpose restrictions. Shall those who are fully vaccinated actually have the same restrictions than those who didn't do their job but didn't get vaccinated? I would see that there will need to be a difference. This also makes sense then from a health services perspective. Only those who are not vaccinated will burden the healthcare system. So we will need to protect the healthcare system from those who are not vaccinated. It's very simple.
Dr. Juni, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.